Well, that was about as much fun at Rocket Mortgage Fieldhouse as you can legitimately expect a team to have. 140-101. The Cavs absolutely throttled the Washington Wizards tonight. Cavs go to 19-15 on the season. We got a 3-for-1 special. How about this? Brendan Gulick, Spencer Davies, Tommy Wild with you from Rocket Mortgage Fieldhouse on a night where the Cavs scored 34, 33, 34, and 39 points in each of the four quarters, respectively. They hit from everywhere all the time, 20 of 42 threes. Obviously, the 140 points in addition to the 37 assists. All of those were single season, or I should say this year's season highs. And they out-rebounded Washington only 62-36. So, I mean, statistically, the stat sheet's gaudy. A fun night for sure. This is probably a little bit more the exception than the norm, but certainly shows what this team's capable of, even with the injuries they're dealing with.
Yeah, and it's been that way, honestly, since the injuries happened themselves. I mean, they've dropped 2 in a row, but those were still games where they were putting threes up like crazy, and they were being, competitive in those games. So this isn't anything out of the ordinary, I don't think, at least since those injuries happened. Their offensive profile has gotten so much more dynamic in the sense of this not just pick and roll heavy anymore. These guys are moving, they're cutting, and the amount of space that is being created because of Sam Merrill, because of Max Strus, who hit 6 threes tonight, George Niang hitting some here and there, Karis LeVert, the job he's done in stepping up for everybody, really. And then, of course, Jarrett Allen just being the passer he's been. The offense has really been clicking for about 2.5 weeks now.
Yeah, weird thing to say, Tommy. I mean, Jarrett Allen being the passer that he's been, it's true. I totally agree with it. But 17 points, 19 rebounds. Nobody would think of your center as being a facilitator. But 7 assists, and it wasn't always just little handoffs. He's got really good vision.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's something where we're starting to see, him filling that void for Evan Mobley. Evan Mobley typically was that kind of guy at the top of the elbow that would get the ball and distribute to, open guys and find those looks. But especially with him being out, Jarrett Allen has filled in that role. He's doing it fantastic. He had seven assists tonight, and he's really looked good as that distributor with Mobley being out.
And look, the reality is, I think a lot of people look at the offseason additions on this team, and that's the first place they point when you want to see what the successes looked like. But I think you could make a really strong case that the emergence of Sam Merrill and Craig Porter Jr. as the season's gone along has been perhaps more impactful because there hasn't been the drop-off that you'd expect when you lose all-star caliber players.
And that's the importance of depth right there. And, I mean, you even see it with Niang, too. These guys are having to step up. Tristan Thompson. I mean, What would happen if they didn't have Tristan Thompson, who's come in and been just an absolute force, and the Renaissance Tour of 2024 is continuing here with him and his, first season back in a few years. So, I feel like those additions have to get more applause than maybe the Strus deal or the deals that, bring the starters in. Those are very important under the radar things that you have to keep an eye for. And you brought up Craig Porter Jr. I still don't know why the guy's not getting 20 minutes a night right now. He played in, 6 minutes there in the first half, and then almost didn't get back into the game until it was out of reach. I feel like Craig Porter Jr. needs to be getting at least 15 to 20 minutes a night, period, even at full strength when Darius Garland's back, when Evan Mobley's back. He's just been so under control, so poised, and just organizes the offense in a way that some other guys on the team haven't, frankly, done. And it's crazy because he's a 23-year-old rookie, but those 5 years of experience in college are paying off for him.
This team is interesting because sometimes the guys you really expect to make a huge impact on a given night are the ones that do, right? Donovan Mitchell is the star on this team. And there were moments tonight where he looked like the face of the franchise. But I continue to actually be pretty impressed with their depth. And it's a different feel than it was a year ago for Cavs fans that maybe haven't watched every game this year. This team it feels like they got a different identity. They don't, in my opinion, they don't seem to play defense quite as hard as they did a year ago. And they are obviously chucking threes at a far higher clip than they were a year ago. But it's a game about possessions. And right now they are winning that battle big time.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you said it. Especially talking about the defense. The defense didn't start out great tonight for the Cavs. I think they let up, 57, 55 points in that first
55,
half.
yeah.
55 points in the first half. So clearly, maybe not been their main focus, but then the rest of the way, they really settled down on defense and limited some of, Jordan Poole, Kyle Kuzma, those guys can get going immediately. So I think they aren't playing maybe as hard of defense last year, but they're still a very good defensive team. I think that's important to say.
And look, you think about what Max Strus said to us post game here when he was essentially asked, hey, what happened in the third quarter where things started to flip in your favor? And he literally goes, well, we decided to play defense. I think sometimes fans are like, well, why don't you just decide to play defense from the start of the game? What a concept that might be. But when you shoot it the way they do, sometimes you can get away with it. And let's give some credit to Washington. I know their record isn't good. They got a couple pretty talented players. I mean, Jordan Poole is a really, really good player. Tyus Jones is a really good point guard. Kyle Kuzma seems to always play pretty well against the Cavs. They're not that far away from being pretty competitive.
Yeah, and I think, too, when it comes to the play defense from the jump, you see a 6-26 team coming into your building.
Sure.
And you kind of just naturally, it's human nature to kind of let your guard down a little, especially when you come out of the gates, hitting your first 4 threes. I think Strus hit his first 2, Mitchell hit his first 2, and then they were off to the races, right? So they were kind of playing that, back and forth game a little bit. And then, what really happened, I think, and I asked JB about this, was in the third quarter, the Cavs went up by 19. But then immediately the Wizards answered with an 8-0 run, called a timeout, and he was seething off of that bench, absolutely seething. And so I asked him about that. I was like, did you say something? He's like, yeah, I just told him to play to our standard. And then what happened after that? They just absolutely punched the gas. And from that point on, it was curtains from there. And I mean, they started off the second half on a 47-26 run. And I mean, I don't know if you really can even call that a run. Like that's just a getaway. Yeah.
I think that's an interesting, kind way to describe what he probably said in that huddle.
Yeah, exactly.
But message received for sure. And to be honest with you, I'm looking forward to watching how they come out of the gates on Friday, because you're going to play the same team, right? And you've got the recent, thought process of, hey, this was a game for a little while in the first half. So on Friday, when you play the team again, you know what they're capable of. And by the way, you might not bury 20 of 42 from deep. And at one point at the beginning of the game, I don't know the exact makes and attempts, but it was 76% 3-pointers made for the Cavs. I mean, it was a great start for sure. Sometimes the ball just doesn't fall like that. So you've got to come out and be ready to go defensively.
For sure. I mean, and the one thing we've talked about with this team all season's been consistency. Whether that be on offense, whether that be on defense. And I think that, going into a back-to-back, you played the Wizards tonight. We're going to see them again on Friday. Hopefully you can consistently come out right away again and, keep hitting those threes and everything. So I think that Friday will be a big test for the Cavs and their consistency to see how they can come out.
Obviously the first of a back-to-back, but also the first of 4 meetings between Cleveland and Washington this year. The other 2, by the way, are in early and late February. So essentially you're playing this team 4 times in a fairly compact window. And, look, the Cavs obviously got off to a pretty slow start to the season, then started to turn the corner a little bit, maybe a little rockier over the last month or so. But a performance like this is the kind of thing that can certainly keep things moving in the right direction. I know they were 5-3 in their last 8 games coming in, but you're not always going to score 140 points. That doesn't happen with any great regularity. So, Spin will give you the final thought.
Yeah, no, I think that it's just been this is the most cliche thing you can say in sports, but next man up. And that's what Jared Allen said at the podium. You hear the same thing from Craig Porter Jr. in the locker room. It's legitimately about the team coming together. And I think JB had a very, very good answer about the threes and all that. They're not just chucking. They're not just pulling up. These are generated shots. These are team made and created. So that's the biggest part, I think, of this offense. And yeah, the defense is going to have a little slippage. You're missing your defensive player of the year candidate, for goodness sake. But you still have enough tools there and enough players there to give you a good effort when you need it most. And I feel like they've held their own at least a little bit more on the defensive end as of late. But the offense, I think, is something they have to look at. Even when they're at full strength, they need to continue getting these threes up like this, because the shot profile is keeping them in these games, and they're around. Even the Bucks loss was only by 8 points. You look at the loss, the one before this, that was a very close game. These are shots that are going to keep you in the game. And I know a lot of fans see that all the threes, and they're thinking, what are they doing? This is not the right way. But the more possessions, like you said earlier, the more possessions you have in the NBA, the better chance you have at putting points up. And that's the stick of it, man.
It's a possession game, and tonight they certainly outpossessed Washington, and they blew them out of the gate in the second half and ran away with this one. 140-101 the final. Of course, for all the latest news and info on the Cleveland Cavaliers, we got you covered over at CavsInsider.com. For Tommy and for Spencer, I'm Brendan Gulick. We'll see you again real soon here on our YouTube channel and over on the site.